Long ago, when the world was a different place and kingdoms ruled the vast forests, a young girl lived with her mother on the outskirts of a small town. Times were hard for mother and daughter, as her husband had left years ago to seek fortune. But the mother was clever, and as a dressmaker, a respected woman in the village. And the girl? Well, she possessed a very special gift. With her sweet and innocent appearance, she captivated everyone. Everyone loved the young girl. But her grandmother loved her best of all. She herself had once been a gifted seamstress, and to express her love for her beloved granddaughter, she once put all her talent and skill into sewing her a red cloak with a hood. It was a true masterpiece that she made, and the child was overjoyed when she received the cloak and did not want to take it off. From then on, everyone only called her Little Red Riding Hood. Full of gratitude for this precious gift, the young girl visited her grandmother as often as possible, and so it came about that the mother said to the girl, "Come, Little Red Riding Hood. Here, you have a piece of cake and a bottle of wine. Take this out to the grandmother. She's ill and will be glad to see you again. And when you leave the village and come into the forest, stay on the way." The girl smiled at her mother and began to nod gravely. "I want to do everything well." Then the child took the basket under her arm and began to march cheerfully along the path to the forest. The grandmother's house was a good half-hour away. The path to her house led past flowering fields, streams, and a vast forest. The sun was shining, and the beautiful day made the girl sing a happy song along the way. Unaware that a dark figure was listening to her happy song, she marched to the entrance of the forest. The figure listening to her was a wolf with a dark, disheveled fur. The girl saw the wolf coming towards her, but she was not afraid. She did not know yet the danger and threat. And since everyone was always instantly captivated by her, she only knew beautiful encounters. She was happy that the wolf came to her. The wolf, for his part, was surprised. He was used to people running away from him or chasing him. He felt that this girl in the red cloak was something special. But something special that was also him. So he wanted to make contact with the child and approached her.
"Good day, my child. How are you?"
He asked. He did not expect an answer. People never answered him. Without even a hint of surprise at a talking wolf, the girl replied, "Hi, Mr. Wolf. I'm Little Red Riding Hood." The wolf was surprised again. So the child could understand him? So he decided to find out what the child was all about.
"And where are you off to, Little Red Riding Hood?"
"I'm going to grandmother's. We baked some cake yesterday, and I'm taking her some of that good wine she likes so much, especially as she's ill at the moment. She lives over there, by the 3 big oak tree." The wolf was surprised at the child's open and fearless response, and he seemed to know the grandmother already, so he asked,
"The old dressmaker in the forest is your grandmother? Did she make you that pretty red cloak too?"
The girl nodded and began to walk further along the path. The wolf didn't want to end the conversation yet, so he began to walk a little way beside Little Red Riding Hood. He pondered how he could use the circumstance to his advantage. He knew the grandmother and knew what she was capable of. But now she was ill, and this cloak had to have something magical about it. Something that the wolf would only love to find out for himself. But he had to be cunning about it. So he turned to Little Red Riding Hood in a good mood and said,
"Little Red Riding Hood, if one saw you walking like that, one would think you wanted to go to school. You don't look to the left or right and miss the most beautiful things. Look at the beautiful flowers all around. Why don't you look around? And don't you hear how beautiful the birds are singing?
Little Red Riding Hood made a thoughtful face and then looked at the flowers in a good mood. The sun was shining playfully through the leaves in the trees. Then she had an idea. If I bring grandmother a fresh bouquet, she will be very happy, and I am still early. And already the girl began to follow the most beautiful flowers. When she had broken off one, she saw an even more beautiful, deeper in the forest. Without really noticing it, Little Red Riding Hood moved further and further away from the path. The wolf now sensed his chance and sprinted to the grandmother's house. The house was enchanting. A lovingly tended front garden with colorful flowers were laid out around the house. The wolf stepped up to the door and knocked. A voice from inside the house spoke up. "Who is outside?"
I'm Little Red Riding Hood, and I bring cake and wine,"
the wolf replied. The ruse worked. The grandmother called to the unexpected visitor to push open the door. She had not locked it. She was too weak to get up. With a somber look and silent steps, the wolf approached the grandmother. And when he finally stood in front of her bed, he opened its mouth unnaturally wide and devoured the grandmother. It happened so quickly that the grandmother did not even notice what was happening to her. The wolf quickly looked around the flat and saw some of grandmother's sleeping clothes lying by the bed. He quickly slipped on the woman's clothes and put on his sleeping cap, pulling it deep onto his face. Then he drew the curtains at the window so it became gloomy in the room. Everything was now ready. Satisfied and complacent, the wolf lay down in bed and pulled the blanket over his head. And now he waited. When Little Red Riding Hood finally had a lush bouquet of flowers in her hand, she promptly remembered her grandmother. So she packed everything up and hurried to her grandmother's house. When she arrived at the house, she saw the door was open. Perhaps the grandmother was already expecting her. So she walked inside. Inside it was dark and gloomy. And for the first time, Little Red Riding Hood felt something she hadn't felt before. She couldn't place this feeling clearly. It rumbled in her stomach, and she felt so tense. It was fear. Although all her senses told her to run away, the girl pulled herself together. She always loved to be with her grandmother, so where would the strange feeling come from? In a good-humored voice, she finally called out, "Good morning, grandmother." But she got no answer. Just as she was about to draw back the curtains, the grandmother called out in a scratchy voice,
"No, leave the curtains. Come here to me."
So she walked towards the bed and sat down with her grandmother. With the little light she had, she couldn't see much, but she saw that the grandmother was sitting in bed with her sleeping cap hanging low on her face. But somehow she seemed different. "Grandmother, why do you have such big ears?"
So I can hear you better."
she replied in a mocking voice. "And grandmother, why do you have such big sparkling eyes?"
"So I can see you better."
The eyes flashed at her, and the girl grew more and more suspicious. "But grandmother, why do you have such big hands?"
"So that I can grab you better."
At that moment, Little Red Riding Hood bent closer to her grandmother to take a better look at her face. She then asked one last question. "Grandmother, what is that horrible big mouth you have?"
"So that I can eat you better,"
replied the wolf, and at that moment he dropped the masquerade. Again he opened his unnaturally large mouth and devoured Little Red Riding Hood without even waiting a moment. Everything happened so quickly that no one could have expected it. The disaster had happened. The wolf grinned smugly and contently and lay down in the bed. All this had made him terribly tired, and now all he wanted to do was sleep. And when he had fallen asleep, he began to snore terribly. A hunter was traveling deep in the forest at the same time. He had been following a trail for several hours, roaming the terrain. When he finally arrived near the clearing, not far from the grandmother's house, he heard a loud snoring coming from the house. This surprised him, because he knew the woman who owned this pretty little house. The old dressmaker had helped him with his things, and he often visited the woman. Slowly, he approached the house, and the snoring grew louder and louder. When he was only a few steps away from the house, he noticed that the door was open. The snoring came from inside and did not sound at all like the old dressmaker. Slowly and carefully, he entered the grandmother's house and looked over at the bed. And there he saw the wolf, making himself comfortable on grandmother's bed and snoring. The hunter looked at him and was startled. "That's the wolf I've heard about. The dark fur, the huge mouth. How can that be?" The hunter learned about a magical being a few months ago. He was sitting around the campfire with other hunters, and they were all telling each other the latest stories. The oldest of them told a scary story about an enchanted animal, once a wolf, but now changed. A terrible animal with a big mouth and big paws. It could even understand people, maybe even speak. The others around the campfire laughed at the old hunter and accused him of telling another of his scary stories. But the young hunter wanted to know more. Then the old hunter turned to him and warned him to be careful. "Stay away from the creature. The beast is condemned to devour everything it comes across with a constant, insatiable hunger. Its stomach must always be full." Speechless, the hunter now stood before the animal with his rifle. But then he remembered the grandmother. Had the beast also devoured the woman? He was not allowed to shoot the animal now. After all, there was still hope for the old woman. Then he saw the dressmaker's scissors lying on the table in the room. Without further ado, he grabbed the scissors and began to open the wolf's belly with a well-aimed and clean cut. It felt as if the scissors were gliding through shadowy fog. But then the belly of the animal opened, and something shimmering red moved inside. With a leap, the little Red Riding Hood came out, wrapped and protected by her cloak. And after another moment, he also discovered the grandmother, who emerged from the animal safe and sound, and the hunter was completely speechless. He had heard a lot about this creature, but he could not believe his eyes. The grandmother now turned to the hunter and thanked him for his brave and clever help with her scissors. "But we must act quickly now, so that this beast never devours anyone again. Fetch me some stones from outside. And Little Red Riding Hood, give me my sewing kit and the red thread I used to sew your cloak." The two hurried off and did what the grandmother told them. And so the hunter put a whole pile of stones into the wolf's stomach. The grandmother took the yarn that Little Red Riding Hood gave her and hurriedly sewed the wolf's cloak back up. When they had finished, they woke the wolf with a bucket of cold water. The wolf jumped up in fright and began to moan terribly. The hunter kept his rifle pointed at the wolf, but the grandmother instructed him to let the wolf go. "He shall now carry the burden with him wherever he goes. That is his punishment." The hunter nodded and let the wolf leave the house. The wolf howled and struggled into the forest. From then on, every step was difficult for him. Little Red Riding Hood, the grandmother, and the hunter were overjoyed. Together they ate another piece of cake until the hunter went his way. His comrades would not believe what he was experiencing here. And from now on, Little Red Riding Hood would not stray from the right path. She would never trust a wolf again. She promised her grandmother when she went home. And the wolf was never seen again. The path was now safe. But still, the kingdom would soon change forever.
Please like and subscribe, and tell us which fairy tale is your favorite.